Okay, but if you don't have a meal plan and you don't have someone telling you what to eat, how do you know how much to eat? That is such a big question.
This goes back to the routine thing, honestly. Like
Yeah.
it's the same mindset.
Gotta put one foot in front of the other, and you'll be around the corner soon.
Welcome to the Live Label Free podcast, where we talk about autism, ADHD, eating disorders, existentialism, and everything in between. I'm your host, Livia Sarah. Now let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to the Live Label Free podcast. I'm your host, Livia Sarah, and today I am joined by my co-host and friend and soon-to-be almost neighbor, Mike.
I'm going to tell on everybody. Liv had to do this intro 5 times.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I don't even know what we're talking about. So, today we're going to be talking about a very autistic topic, and that is routines and what happens when our routines are impeded on and how we deal with that.
Obviously, routines are a forever topic when it comes to autism. We like our routines. We don't like it when they're disrupted, but disruptions, of course, happen. And I think it's always worth talking about. I would say, the glory of routines. I find very comfortable with them, but obviously you kind of have to be able to adjust to whenever they get shifted, unplanned, which is something I went through recently. And finding ways to sort of cope and find your groove amongst those disruptions, I think, is an important part of thriving as a neurodivergent individual.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think last week I was talking with someone in the UK who's part of this pathway for autism and eating disorders. And I was telling her how, we were talking about difficulty with change in autistic people and how there's this just like overall really common misconception that autistic people have difficulty with like any kind of change. And that's like not true at all.
Yeah.
We have difficulty with changes that we have no control over, that we have no say in. But when we initiate the change or we want the change, that's fine. And I think when it comes to eating disorder recovery specifically, I think that kind of change can be so difficult because like when it comes to like weight gain, you have no idea how much weight you're going to gain, what it's going to feel like, what other people are going to think of you, if other people are going to suddenly think you're healthy and fine and recovered when you're no longer emaciated or whatever.
Yeah.
So we were just talking about that misconception and how, in so many ways, routines serve as the protection against the change we have no control over. And that goes hand in hand, obviously, with eating disorders is and like, for example, like fear of weight gain. I was writing something today about how for many autistic people, the fear of weight gain is less rooted in like looking a certain way or like body image and that kind of stuff. Not for everyone, but for me personally, that was never really a big issue. But it was more about, the change that I couldn't control. And for me, all the eating disorder routines, having my food and exercise down to an exact science was a way for me to quote unquote control and avoid the uncontrollable changes that
Yes.
inevitably would happen. I hope that makes sense.
No. I mean, that's what it is all about. Like, you can't control these other aspects of your life because that's how life works.
Yeah,
So you hone down on what you are able to control and creates like really rigid routines around. And that tends to be what like the disorder latches onto because that's how it breeds. And the more chaotic other things are, the harder it is to let go of those control mechanisms you're building in place to make yourself feel safe amongst the chaos.
totally. Yeah. And I think the reason why I originally brought up this conversation, I went on like so many tangents there because I'm working on this fear of waking series. And I was just thinking about like why autistic people feel waking and the routine and the change and blah, blah. But the reason why I originally brought up this woman that I was talking to last week is because I gave this example of, if I was so stuck to my routines, like I would not be able to travel as much as I do. So it's kind of like what we were talking about in the Q&A a little while ago about the structureless structure and how it's very important to have a structure, a way of routining, so to say, that works for you, that you can kind of be flexible with depending on the situation or the circumstances. Because, like, for me, I can be in France, or I can be in DC, or I can be in Boston, or I can be in San Francisco, or wherever. And everywhere I am, even though obviously everything's always going to be a bit different, I still do pretty much everything in the same way. I like to get up at the same time. I like to, buy the same groceries. I like to eat at the same time. I do my client calls at the same time. Because if I didn't have those boundaries in place, if I didn't have those like walls in place, then suddenly all the options become infinite. And it's like I'm in this existential void of, well, how do I know what's the right way if there's no guidelines in place? And I think ultimately that's the purpose that routines serve for us autistic people, is they provide us with guidelines, and guidelines help us feel safe.
Yeah, it's fallbacks. And I think obviously flexibility and cognitive flexibility is something that exists on a spectrum amongst the spectrum. So there are people who have more difficult time, and there's people who have, much easier time with it. Something you kind of touched on, which is we're not as rigid with change as people think, because we are often in control of the change. It's the ones that we can't control that are the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And part of like having that structureless structure for me is always keeping the possibilities in mind with everything. Okay, this could change. Then here's other options that can go along with that change. And just allowing yourself to know that I could wake up tomorrow and my routine can be completely disrupted by something. So here is how, I might be able to deal with it, or just knowing that it's a possibility, which I think helps, because if I know it's a possibility, then I have some form of control over it. Like, it's not being sprung on me.
Yeah, it's the change and the disruptions that are sprung on us that are not fun. Got questions about extreme hunger? Well, I've got answers. More specifically, I answer the top 10 most frequently asked questions about extreme hunger in my completely free Extreme Hunger Guide. Some of the questions I answer are: what to do if you experience extreme hunger when you're already weight restored? How to tell if it's mental hunger or emotional eating? What's the difference between extreme hunger and binge eating disorder? And of course, 7 other common questions. Grab your free guide at livelabelfree.com/extreme-hunger-guide. So that's livelabelfree, like the name of this podcast, .com/extreme-hunger-guide. And now, let's get back to today's episode. Mike, I do want to give you the chance to get into your kind of recent experience with that, because I had one too. Like, that's part of the reason why I'm in France, because originally I was going to be in Spain right now, and then there was flooding. My whole Airbnb flooded. So last minute I had to change everything. And something that was really significant for me, though, was even though I was so stressed the day that it all happened, I was like, okay, I can't stay here anymore. I really was relatively quickly able to adapt and, I guess, quote unquote, be flexible and take a different route. And I think that's also in part because I wasn't trying to resist the change. And I think what often happens when something does change that we aren't happy with, what makes it way harder than it needs to be, is when we have like judgments and mental rejection against, like, it shouldn't be that way. No, like, I can't do it. And we put all these labels and limiting beliefs around it. And I think that's ultimately what makes it harder. And that's why I think a big part of eating disorder recovery, but also like life at large, is, just the way that we choose to view situations, rather than it should or shouldn't, rather than the judgment, is inviting curiosity to it. Like, how can I adapt in these circumstances? Like, what is the next best step for me? And obviously that requires an incredible awareness of yourself and what you need and what works for you to cope. And I'm not saying, that oh, well, now every bad thing that happens to you, I'm just going to make the best of it. Like, because some things just suck. But I think that that quote, what you resist persists, is just so, I mean, that's like what's coming up in me right now because I have just firsthand experienced that whenever something unfavorable has happened for me, what makes it all the more unfavorable is my trying to fight it, even though it ultimately can't be fought. So, that being said, Mike, A, I wonder what's coming up for you, and B, do you want to kind of tell us about your job and how that has disrupted your routine?
First, something that came up to me while you were talking is, I like analogies, and this isn't like my analogy or anything, but a bamboo tree in really any tree, but I like bamboo better because bamboo is a little stronger and bends more. Bamboo in a windstorm,
Mm-hmm.
where you have this very hard, versatile substance that then bends with the wind, bends with the environment, is able to move along with it, but stays put. And I think that is just something to keep in mind for anybody. Like this isn't like a specific neurodivergent thing, just for
Mm-hmm.
humankind and being alive on this planet is having the ability to move with life's windstorms and what it brings. And it can bend you, but you remind yourself that you're still staying put, like you're not breaking and flying off uncontrollably, even if it kind of feels like it. And I definitely hit one recently, which was back in September. I was suddenly fired from my job.
Wait, can we just clarify that I didn't fire you?
Yes, that is,
Okay.
yes. Not from this job, obviously, because I'm here right now.
Yeah, because I was just like thinking, like, what if the listeners think that I have like you full time hired, like, which I would be a dream, but I'm financially not in a position to take him on full time, so I would not fire Mike. Just to clarify that.
No, no. I have lots of jobs. I have one less than I did. It was my main job, though. At the time, it was my main job that I had been working at for over 5 years, I guess, at this point. And I mean, I was quote unquote fired. They gave like a reason, but it didn't make, I was laid off. I think they maybe replaced me with AI, to be honest with you. That's not even like a joke. I think they
Oh no,
actually
I
might be.
I was actually thinking about that just like yesterday, how like the future part of the future of AI that we talk about is like just replacing human jobs.
We're all screwed.
Not
Yeah,
all of us, but
I was a internet safety evaluator. So I examined content on YouTube and stuff like that. I've since November 5th, I've been very happy that I got fired. So I suddenly
yeah.
don't have to look at things anymore. But I mean, it was wild. There was no, just one day, I got an email that I was, well, first I was apparently put under review for the first time ever for low quality performance.
To just
A
like
week,
subtly like foreshadow, yeah, this is coming up, friend, but we want to like make it seem like we did a review on you.
yeah,
Yeah.
which apparently can take, anywhere from a few weeks to a month, who knows. By the way, this was a week after they gave me a bonus for productivity and performance. And then suddenly I apparently had a very low performance and low quality of work. 2 days later, I got an email saying my release from employment email, which sounded like they were divorcing me, and just just out of nowhere. I was under review on Wednesday afternoon, and then I woke up to not having a job on Friday.
Well, you still had my job.
Luckily I
No.
had quite a few jobs.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but it was my main one. It was the one I had a 401k with. I had
Oh
paid time
gosh.
off, and then I was about to go on vacation like a
Oh
couple weeks
gosh.
later, and I had saved up all this PTO for that vacation. Luckily, I was still able to get into the timesheet, so quickly was able to add it to the week prior that I got fired. So they still paid me all that PTO
Oh, that's good
because
you
I
did
was still
that.
able to get into my timesheet for like 6 more hours
Oh, that's good.
before they locked me out. So I just quickly did that. And obviously, like, losing your job is traumatic for anybody. And look at the amount of neurodivergent people who lose their jobs regularly or have difficulty with employments. It's not easy for us
Yeah.
for any form of employment. And the thing that I discovered though was obviously, trauma, losing your job. There is a secondary trauma that I was not sort of ready for, which is my entire routine that was entrenched in my life, even if I hated it some days, was just gone. was just 100% gone. It was screwed up. Everything I could at least like kind of fluctuate my day around or my
Mhm.
week around, I always had as a fallback was just gone. And I didn't had no plan for that. And it was interesting. I was running a support group and somebody there had lost their job. And I happened to ask, like, what did you find about the routine change? And he immediately brought up all the things that I had been feeling. I don't hear this talked about by anybody, that there is like a secondary trauma for us that honestly in some ways was even more traumatic than the actual job loss. Like that I was almost able to, because I had other jobs obviously,
Mhm.
and there was nothing I could do about it, which kind of helped, I guess, in some weird way.
Right.
Like I couldn't like kick my legs and like have a tantrum about it. Like that wasn't going to
Yeah.
solve anything. But the routine change is what I couldn't get over, and I'm still a little screwed up from it, and I still haven't really found a normal routine yet. Like I'm kind of dancing around one right now, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's even going to work, which has also caused me to pretty much just work every day, even on weekends, because I don't know what the fallback is. And I've been insanely burnt out because of that. I'm going to sleep at like 10 p.m. for the first time in my life lately. And that's wild. I do not like that, by the way. I am a night person. I am not a day person. If I could be a bat, I would. But I even just this sounds like this is like an ED like related thing, but no, like there was a certain like routine to like when my meals would come that then got disrupted, and then that was weird where it's like, oh, I'm free to like just do whatever I kind of want, which was odd. Like the only thing that was kind of the same was like, okay, I can get up and I have a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, and that was kind of it. Like that was the only thing. And luckily that I had just gotten another job 3-4 months earlier, so I was able to up the hours on that one. And then I got another job like right after that doing admin work for like a therapy practice, and that helped bridge a little bit of the lost income, so it's not so bad. But it was that routine change that just caught me completely off guard, because I've never heard anyone discuss that in regards to being neurodivergent and the unemployment problem
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
perpetuates the community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a really important topic. And I mean, I have to be honest that like, and maybe this is obvious, but like as someone who myself who isn't employed by anyone in the traditional sense of the word, I don't really resonate with the that employment piece and like being dependent on someone to employ you, because I do feel like in my own business, like it sounds weird because like I'm not in control of everything. Like I'm not in control of a client signing up tomorrow, that many books being sold. But in many regards, I feel like I am more in control of my income than someone, who is employed by an employer. And there were also a lot of parallels with what you were saying about losing your job and the routine disruption that comes with that, with regards to my foot getting injured a month ago. Because suddenly, I couldn't do everything that I do in a day to regulate myself or to make sure that I have groceries in the house, because I just literally couldn't walk. So it was trying to navigate for me, how do I change everything now to continue doing work and putting in the hours in other areas, kind of like you with your other jobs, but also like respecting my mental sanity and the fact that I'm also burnt out right now. How do I deal with that piece? So that was really challenging for me. But something that you did bring up that I thought was really interesting that I do want to dive into, because I know that a lot of people do listen to this podcast for understanding autism and eating disorder specifically, is when you said this isn't an ED thing or anything, but the disruption when it comes to meals. I find the fact that you almost put that little disclaimer, like this isn't an ED thing. I find that so interesting and something that I honestly still do so much of the time too. Whenever I do things now that were like eating disorder behaviors in that time, I feel like I need to defend myself. And that's such a common experience. And I think especially a common experience in autistic people, because we almost feel like people aren't getting our intentions. So we need to over explain ourselves to prove, like, no, you have to understand, like, this is my intention, not this is this. So, like, for me, I find whenever I am calling someone and I'm on a walk, I will say, I'm on a walk. because I need time to clear my head, because I need to regulate myself, because XYZ, because I immediately feel like they're gonna be like, oh, she's on a walk because she's trying to burn calories, even though my walks back then were never about calories anyways, but
Yeah.
that's beside the point. Or like, I don't like eating in front of other people unless I feel very, very, very safe with them. This is why I rarely go out to restaurants because it's very overstimulating to me. And I literally just get nauseous that I just have a hard time eating in public settings. And even that, I find myself almost trying to explain to myself, like, this doesn't have to do with the eating disorder. This doesn't have to do with restriction. And, I'm curious, Mike, what your thoughts around that and how much you've maybe seen or heard about this phenomenon in people who, are recovered, who are at a point really well in recovery, where they almost feel they need to over explain themselves for every single action that could potentially be interpreted as an eating disorder behavior.
Yes. So I mean, this is true of anybody, I think, who is recovered or been in recovery. But when you add in neurodivergence, because we are the kings and queens of over explaining things and then getting really embarrassed because we just over explained everything. And yeah, we do it to ourselves. Like, I always liken it to whenever you become aware of breathing, of your own breathing.
Oh God.
And then
Yeah.
suddenly you're like, oh no, I'm aware of it. So if I don't think about it, I'll stop breathing and die. It's
Well,
just such a
I don't have
weird,
that,
stupid thing.
but I do have that, in those like meditations where it's like, now become aware of your breath and like take a deep inhale and a deep exhale. I feel like my breathing just becomes so bad. Like I'm like, did I deeply inhale for too long? Like how long should I deeply exhale for? Like, and then
Forgot
breathing,
how to breathe. Yeah.
and suddenly breathing becomes the most uncomfortable, like most suffocating thing ever.
Or it's akin to like suddenly forgetting how to sit down in a chair. It's something that is so like intrinsic to you and just like part of your natural being, but suddenly you're kind of aware of it. And I think with a lot of things around eating after you've kind of been through an eating disorder, you just don't want to have someone cock their head at you just in
Yeah.
case, and even if it's not going to enter their minds,
Mhm.
you're just used to it. Also, to ourselves, I think this is mostly with people who are neurodivergent. Now that we are like aware of our behaviors, we have kind of this out of body experience with a lot of them where we kind of are on this top down view of ourselves. So we're looking like, okay, but is it? Okay, it's not. Okay, cool. It's not. Just making sure that isn't something that was still baked in there that we weren't paying attention to. And I mean, so often I'm like, my stomach was a little screwed up last night and we went out to like dinner after a show that I worked. And I was like, my stomach was kind of screwed up all day. It's like, I just kind of wanted to go home, but it's like, fine, we're going out. I haven't eaten since like 11 something. It's like nearly 9 o'clock. It is 9 o'clock actually. So I'm like, okay, clearly I need to eat. I do not want food right now. So I ordered like a barbecue chicken salad. I love salads. I
Me
love salads so
too.
much.
Okay, we're getting
Salads
a
are the
salad
best.
when I travel. Yeah, that's like another random announcement. I'm flying to DC. The irony in January.
Maybe a
But
terrible idea. We'll see.
we'll see. But yeah, it's hopefully better than being here. But yeah, let's get a salad together. What do you know any good places?
I know a couple places that have some really good salads near me. For instance, like this barbecue chicken salad, which was really goddamn good. I'll take anything with avocado on it. So this was actually the first real salad I had ordered at a restaurant in a while. I had stopped eating salads because not stopped completely. I had some here and there, have them for dinner here, whatever. There are two things I like in this world. I like building salads and I like building sandwiches.
I feel like you talked about sandwiches on the last podcast.
I talk about sandwiches a lot. I like making sandwiches. When I was deep in ED by like the last 2-3 years or whatever, that's pretty much what I ate. Like I'd always have they'd be like giant salads because I would only eat like twice a day. And I would tend to add salad to anything else, which was always kind of strange, but full dinner plate. But then I'd still have to add like a salad on the side. But I stopped eating them in recovery. Because despite the fact I had eaten them all the time, recovery stomach did not like the roughage and still kind of doesn't, which is frustrating.
What do you mean by recovery stomach?
I still do a lot of gastro problems in recovery from changing eating habits and everything else. And has and was a lot more sensitive than it is right now. It's calmed down somewhat. And I've found some tricks here and there to kind of deal with it. It went from being able to like be perfectly fine eating a salad to really bad pain if I ate like roughage or things like that, which bums me out. But also it would kind of trigger me a little bit whenever I eat a salad, especially since I was used to eating giant salads, because once again I also like building them.
Like, I'm sorry, but like, how giant?
They were pretty large and would have like a lot of different. That's the great thing about salad, you can put anything on it. Crazy eyes when I said that. So I had like a hard time like figuring out what this is like just me making a regular ass salad look like anymore. Like I don't really remember when I used to do that before I started like making those "it has to last me all day" kind of salads. And I've gotten like past, but eating the salad was still like, I had to stop and go, am I doing it because I'm restricting?
Yeah.
Despite not having any of those thoughts in my head, I still had to go like, no, I had to go through it like step-by-step process in my head. Like, and ordering it was kind of like a little bit of a trigger for me because it brings back memories. But also I had to be a little bit like, you're not doing an ED behavior. You're not doing an ED behavior. You're doing it for this reason, this reason, this reason. Also, it's fucking sounds delicious. And honestly, nothing on this menu sounds appetizing to me right now because I'm not feeling that great. I had to go through like all the reasons in my head to remind myself that I do not still have an eating disorder. And that is not why I'm eating this. And I mean, it didn't bum me out or anything, but it was like, man, how long until like that leaves my head where I can actually like make food decisions? Like there's still some stuff I have a hard time with for that reason, just because, and I don't want to have to tell myself that I'm doing this for like not bad reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so many just little avenues that I would want to go down because just first of all, with the over explaining and trying to just like almost like coach yourself, like justify your decisions. I do that all the time with regards to giving myself permission to rest because I feel this immense, I wouldn't say it's guilt because I don't feel like I'm doing something morally wrong. What I find myself doing is like I'm working, doing all this writing, and then there's like one day where my brain just isn't working how I want it to, and I will call my mom and just for like an hour I will be telling her like, no, but it's okay for me to take a break because I did this yesterday and I did that, and it's okay for me to take a break because I have a client tomorrow, so I need to prepare, and it's okay to, and
Yeah.
I remember she asked me like this was really recently. She was like, "Are you talking to me or to yourself?" Because half the time our phone calls are literally me monologuing for an hour. And it's so funny because then she'll like try and jump into the conversation and then I will realize, oh my gosh, I've been talking for 40 minutes straight. And she'll be like, I enjoy listening to you, honey. But yeah, I mean, with the productivity, I think that for me is almost, I do that so much now with regards to resting and productivity because I'm not channeling that energy into my eating disorder anymore. Like, I think if I still had an eating disorder, it would be constantly justifying my food decisions, constantly justifying why I'm not exercising, why I am exercising, why I'm eating a salad, why I'm not eating a salad, why I'm eating an extra snack. You know, it's constantly that. And I think this is where the autistic tendency to everything needs to have a reason for us. And I think that's why we do this justification. Because if we just order a salad, no labels, no judgment, no nothing attached to that, then we can't order the salad because there has to be a reason for ordering the salad. And I think when there's that doubt of, well, could the reason be ED, then you immediately jump to, oh, why can't I just be free from the eating disorder thoughts? Because look, it's still ruling my life. So I think it's less about removing any kind of thoughts or judgments because let's face it, the autistic brain is going to overthink every single fucking thing, whether we like it or not. But I think it's about observing that and trusting that no, I'm ordering a salad because I want a salad, and then moving on and not giving so much attention to the possibility that it could be ED driven because okay, then it is, and then afterwards you realize and you're like, okay, we're not doing that again. You know what I mean? And I think such a big part of recovery is just forgiving yourself all the damn time. And and then another thing that came up for me that I would love to do an episode on separately because it's a whole other topic and I get asked this so much by my clients especially is, okay, but if you don't have a meal plan and you don't have someone telling you what to eat, how do you know how much to eat? That is such a big question.
This goes back to the routine thing, honestly. Like
Yeah.
it's the same mindset.
Yeah. And I think especially where this question comes up a lot is due to, I almost see in the recovery space like two polar opposite ends of the spectrum. There's like eating the meal plan, following the exchanges to a T, weighing, measuring your food, everything is precise. And then there's intuitive eating, honor your hunger, feel your fullness, feel your satisfaction. Like, and I think for the autistic mind, that's like it has to be one or the other. I think it can be so hard to find a middle zone in between there that works for you as a unique human. And I think
Yes.
that's why this question of, okay, but how do you know how much to eat is like we almost want like a third base instead of
Exactly, yes.
instead of meal plan, instead of intuitive eating. Okay, well, what's the third option that I don't know about? Tell me about this third option. I am so excited to share that my cookbook, Nourishing Neurodiversity, has a brand new cover. My younger sister May, a fellow ADHDer, and I have once again paired our neurodivergent powers to bring you this stunning new cover, which, at least I think, does the interior of the cookbook much more justice than the previous cover. Because even though we're told to not judge a book by its cover, let's be real here. People do. So, what is inside the book? In Nourishing Neurodiversity, you'll find over 50 plant based recipes that are easy and quick, allergen free, and fully customizable to fit your unique sensory preferences. My cookbook is also filled with tips to promote digestive health so that you can optimize that gut brain connection. It's filled with strategies to support executive functioning, and last but not least, this updated version of Nourishing Neurodiversity also comes with a free guide called 5 Autistic Kitchen Hacks, in which I share my top 5 tips for navigating the kitchen as a neurodivergent person. Grab your copy of Nourishing Neurodiversity today at livelabelfree.com/cookbook. That's livelabelfree.com/cookbook. And now, let's get back to today's episode.
It has
Yeah.
to be something that is a complete structure that I can
Yes.
understand and has like rules inside of a box. Like I
Right.
can't just pick and choose from different things, which is what
Yeah.
you're supposed to do. Like
Right.
you're like once again, it goes back to, but how do I sit in the chair? Like it's
Exactly.
you. We all, like you said, we all ask the question in recovery: how much am I supposed to eat?
Yeah.
Think about how ridiculous that question is sometimes, though. Remember when you were like before the eating disorder and you didn't think about that so much? Like, I can't go back to that mindset, which is weird because it feels alien to me. But it was like, okay, I did used to do that just fine.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting what's going on right now because when you said that, how much to eat, just think about how ridiculous that question was. I almost felt like some anger coming inside me. Not because I need to be told, but because I think for the person that is in quasi recovery, I think that there's so much frustration to
Yes.
almost have that confirmed that there is no answer to this is how much you're supposed to eat. Because even for me though, like if I asked myself right now, Livia, how do you know how much to eat? I almost feel anger and frustration arising in myself because I'm like, no, but we can't think about that. Like, because there's no answer to that, you can't think about that. And I know for myself, if I started to ask myself that question now, my whole eating would become fucked up.
Yeah.
And I think
Was I
it's
hungry enough to eat all that?
yeah,
Did
because
I
you
not
start
eat
questioning
enough? Yeah.
everything. And
Hmm.
the moment you're like a little too full, it's like, I overate, I binged. Like, I need to have a meal plan again because this is confirmation that my body can't be trusted, And
Yes.
there's this quote by Julia Cameron, and I actually quote her in my book, How to Get Out of Quasi Recovery, and that is, perfectionism is not a quest for the best, it's a pursuit of finding the worst in ourselves, of confirming our failure, every time you fail, saying, well, quote unquote, try again. And I love that quote so much because I think that's exactly what us autistic and neurodivergent people do when we say, oh, I'm just perfectionistic. Oh, I just want to get it right. Is you're not trying to get anything right. You're just trying to pick out your failures. You can say, see, this is why I need to be perfect because otherwise I'll mess up. And I think, taking that back to food, something that has set me free is, to stop. And this is again the whole thing with living label free is I stopped attaching judgment to every sensation that felt like it was veering off of, this homeostatic line that I felt like I had to achieve to be quote unquote balanced and healthy and all this. Because the reality is like every single day, every moment of the day, I don't feel like at peace. I never feel at peace. And I think that's again one of those big misconceptions is that everything is going to be magically better like after an eating disorder. And that's not true. Like I struggle every moment of every day. And I think that's part and parcel of being a neurodivergent human who feels like this body that we're supposed to say is our home never feels like it agrees with what you want. And that's hard. But I stopped fighting it. I stopped trying to control it because I know I can't. And instead, I've stopped trying to strive for feeling this certain way that I know I'm never going to feel because I never, ever even felt that way. And instead, focusing on what I want my life to mean for myself, but also for other people. And I know this is getting like very philosophical, but this is just where my brain is going. But back to the food and the not knowing how much to eat. If I eat quote unquote too much, and that's because I feel way more full and comfortable. No, I'm not immediately going to slap a label on that of, oh, see, you can't be trusted, or oh, see, you're gluttonous, or oh, see, you're this. It's more like, okay, I guess I'll just be less hungry later, you just move on.
Yeah, pretty much. Or, well, I guess maybe I know that for next time. It's just any number of things. And by the way, to go back to me saying how ridiculous that sounds.
Oh, I don't want you to feel bad now.
No. No, because I mean, I admittedly like, yeah, that is kind of like a harsh way of putting that. What I really mean is I liked to poke fun at myself in recovery, mainly because it gave me some form of power over it. And when you kind of are able to poke holes in those thoughts and some of the ideas that are planted in your brain during that time, and you're able to poke fun at them. And in doing so, you're able to poke holes in them. And in doing that, they're able to sink. That gave me like a lot of strength and a lot of ability to get through things. And I still do that now. And I mean, this is a whole other thing, but I've talked about this with some other people who have suffered from depression and stuff. Like, we compare notes, and no one can tell a funnier suicide joke than someone who has attempted suicide.
Yeah.
Like, we are all aces at it. And I don't know, I find a lot of like weird comfort in that, being able to tell those kind of jokes and also being able to say stuff like, yeah, most of my eating disorder thoughts are fucking stupid. They don't make any sense. And I kind of can laugh at them a little bit. And I can kind of like, I have to kind of laugh at myself a little bit sometimes too, because in doing that, I have autonomy.
Totally. Yeah, no, and I mean, again, I think the anger, it wasn't, like I said, it was more of me placing myself into someone, even maybe like who's experiencing, I think, more of it, like, and just no appetite for anything. Because I know that, and this is kind of where is like, what context are we talking in, because that's also so important part of it. And I think when I hear, like, if I am someone who genuinely never feels hunger cues, who is just turned off by food, who just finds food so difficult, that to then hear someone say, what a ridiculous question, how much to eat? I think they just genuinely, in every single bone of their body, they're like, yeah, but I need someone to tell me how much to eat.
Oh, yeah, that is a completely different circumstance.
Yeah, and I think it almost sounded to me like, and I don't think this is what you meant, but I think to me it sounded like, how ridiculous to not be able to eat intuitively. That's how I heard it, which I am almost fine with that, like just for me as a subjective human, because I have a problem with the term intuitive eating because that method or program that it's now become has taken away, in my opinion, has taken away the essence of the phrase intuitive eating. Because if I now say I'm an intuitive eater, then people will be like, no, but I disagree with the intuitive eating movement. But I'm like, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about me following my unique, authentic, individual, one in a gazillion billion autistic intuition. That's me being intuitive, just not associated to this book or this program or these people who made it up. And I think that's kind of just really frustrating to me. And I don't know why I'm bringing this up right now, but I
And I'll
almost,
dunk on intuitive eating. Yeah, no, I definitely did not mean intuitive eating, but I also agree with you. I like original where it comes from intuitive eating, which is, as you said, is just before it was co-opted by wellness culture and diet
yeah,
culture, and it got very white people hoity-toity. I don't know how else to put this.
yeah, yeah.
It's something completely different than what it meant. For instance, as soon as we're done with this call, I'm gonna get a big ass cookie that I got at a Christmas market over the weekend.
Literally, Mike, I cannot even begin to express how badly I wish my flight was right now.
They're so good. They're peanut butter.
Oh my God.
According to wellness intuitive eating, let's see, I'm not hungry. I'm still full from food I had earlier, and my body's not needing any of that right now. And blah blah blah. Actual like original intuitive eating. Oh, you want a cookie? Oh, you should eat that cookie.
Yeah,
That's literally all it is, and that's what I mean by like trying to wrap up rules into this, and then you're getting away from like what the word intuitive actually means. Like just look up,
yeah,
the actual definition, like where it comes from. It's
exactly.
just you and what you want, and that's why like those thoughts that take us away from that, and wellness intuitive eating takes us away from that too, because it's telling us there are rules to how much
Yeah.
we should be eating and whatnot. And of course, obviously, if you do have certain issues like RFID and whatnot, that is a completely like separate thing. And that's
Hmm.
when actual more mechanical rules can actually be a much better aid for you in times like that.
Yeah.
But for a large majority, it's I think kind of an ED brain does this a lot, and why I think we all kind of go through this particular question of how much I'm supposed to eat in quasi is because we're still looking for the rule.
Yeah.
But is there a rule that makes it okay what I'm doing? And that's
Yeah.
what we're really looking for.
Oh my gosh, this is literally like, I cannot wait for you to read my quasi book because I talk about this intuitive. I'm just gonna look up the chapter because the whole book is about how quasi recovery is caused by looking for another rule book after the eating disorder.
Yes.
And I actually have one of my previous clients designing the cover. It's an incredible partnership. And I talk about in my quasi book, I talk about the void a lot and how true freedom emerges from the void and how the eating disorder is like one side of the void and quasi recovery is the other side of the void. But to find freedom, you have to do a trust fall into the void, into what you can't see. I have a chapter in my quasi book titled How Do I Eat Without a Meal Plan? Because I think that's one of those questions that's like, yeah, but how do I eat without structure? How do I eat without knowing or whatever? And I talk about how during my eating disorder, I write, even though I counted calories and weighed food for a majority of my eating disorder, most of the restriction was intuitive. Measured or not, I knew exactly what I had to eat to feel just barely full and how much I had to exercise to exhaust myself just enough without collapsing. The constant mental hunger was torturous, but my obsession with recipes and food photos satisfied me just enough to make it manageable. I knew how to intuitively maintain my eating disorder, so why shouldn't I also intuitively be able to maintain my healthy self? But perhaps it was the very fear of maintaining health that caused me to cling to an external eating plan. Because if I screwed up, well, then at least I didn't have to blame myself. And obviously, I could go on and but I think that's exactly, why we feel like we need the plan, we need the pamphlet, we need the roadmap, we need to watch other people's what I eat in a day videos, because then if we follow that plan and it doesn't work, well, then we're off the hook. There's no one to blame because
Yeah,
I just
there's no
followed the structure.
responsibility.
Yep.
Yeah. I was always looking for places to offload my responsibility.
Yep, and that goes totally back to, that quote by English philosopher Albert Hubbard, responsibility is the price of freedom. And I think that's why there's all these recovery books say, an eating disorder isn't your fault, but if you want freedom, you're gonna have to stop being a victim. And I know that's a tough word, but you're going to have to choose to take responsibility. And then there's that whole, what if I can't handle the responsibilities of being healthy, which I've done a whole podcast on, which is also in my quasi book. But even that, it's like, how do you say, by subjecting yourself? I'm trying to find the word, by blank blank to this fear of I can't be healthy, you're again making yourself powerless against something greater than you. But how can you ever have autonomy and freedom over your own life if you're going to constantly blame all the circumstances on something greater than you?
I mean, I'm reminded of, I don't know if I even said, I might have said this on a previous episode or not, but something a friend of mine says all the time, which is mental illness is not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that a lot, just in terms of myself, and not just with like an eating disorder, just with all the other things I struggle with that really the eating disorder was born from. And responsibility makes it sound like it's harsh or like it's some sort of negative. I think because responsibility, probably from older generations and so parenting, the idea of responsibility is almost punishment.
Yep.
But responsibility of self can actually be a really beautiful thing. It just means you have power. I actually had power to just do what I wanted to do. I didn't have to actually play by a rule book, or I didn't have to try to do something a certain way. I had the responsibility to just deal with myself.
Yeah.
And that was actually wonderful. Like we have responsibility for a lot of things in our life that we don't really consider responsibility, but we can even kind of consider it's almost pleasure activities or leisure. Or, it's like I have a lot of responsibility to my cat. And I don't think about that in like terms of like this harsh, like, going to a workhouse. Yeah, where she's somewhere right now.
I can't wait to meet her.
Hopefully she doesn't scratch you. He's a bully.
Oh, but wait, like also to you?
Oh, no, not to me.
Oh,
no, she's so kind to her father. But it's like, I don't consider that, going to the workhouse responsibility sort of thing. Like, no, that's something I love to do. That's part of me, if anything. Editing podcasts is a responsibility. Doing some of the podcasts that I do, like Spark Launch or Box Office Pulp or something, I like doing those. I don't consider those responsibility.
Yeah.
But they are. It's the same thing. Like, responsibility isn't something that needs to be harsh. And when it's applied to you specifically, that's just you being an autonomous human.
Yeah, I mean, technically, and this is probably just my brain trying to find patterns and connections and nuances and everything, but I'm like, technically every single freaking action you take is your responsibility. Like me saying, like when we stop this podcast and I close my laptop and I, decide to put that insane pile of dishes like away in the dishwasher and I go to the toilet because I need to go pee, those are all technically my responsibility. No one else can do them for me. No one else can go to the bathroom for me. So again, obviously it's like, okay, but that's such an obvious example, Livia. But I think, that's also when it comes to just recovery, it's part of taking the responsibility is to stop overthinking how to take responsibility and to just take it. And I think that goes back to the whole intuitive eating thing. It's like, the more you think about the how, the more you're not going to be able to do it because there is no how. There's just a go or a do. Yeah, I mean, I hope that makes sense. But that's kind of, even when, oh my God, what's coming up for me right now is even when people say that, use that phrase, how do I deal with X, Y, Z? Half the time, most of the time, a majority of the time, there is no dealing with XYZ. There's just moving through XYZ. There's just learning to cope with XYZ. I don't even, do you know what I'm getting at?
Oh, 100%. It's funny, like something in peer support, as kind of ridiculous as it sounds, is, and I think you can actually just apply this to yourself, honestly. And it's something I try to do is like, how do I deal with X, Y, and Z? How do you want to?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh.
No one ever stops to ask that question. How do you want to?
I love that you're saying this want versus need thing because I talk about this in the Autistically Free Academy and in the quasi book. I literally have a chapter. The book is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is recovery, part 2 is discovery, and part 3 is art. And the first 2 chapters of the part discovery are what do you want and what do you need. And the what do you want chapter starts with, this is perhaps the most important question you can ever ask yourself, yet it's precisely the question that most people don't ask and don't have an answer to. And then with the what do you need thing, it's almost that responsibility thing because I say, we ask what we need so we don't have to confront the difficult question of asking, what do I want? And when we say, I need more proof, I need more instructions, XYZ, you're constantly excusing yourself from taking responsibility because you quote unquote need more whatever it is. And I feel like with these kinds of topics, I feel like I constantly feel this urging, and I've said it a few times. I hope that makes sense. And I know a lot of autistic people do that because I feel like we've been so
Always.
conditioned that what we say just people don't understand it, or it's interpreted wrong. So we say, I hope that makes sense. And I find that when I'm like messaging my clients or other autistic friends, and I always end my message with this long philosophical thing. And I'm like, I hope that makes sense. And one of my friends said, I love how you always say, I hope that makes sense, even though whenever you write something, it makes more sense than anything else because it's like an autistic communication. Anyways, I think we want to wrap up this episode. Yeah, how are we gonna wrap up?
However you normally end the podcast.
I never normally end the podcast. Okay, well, everyone, thanks so much for listening. And if you do enjoy these conversations and us going into literally an infinite amount of tangents, we would love to hear from you. We would love to hear your thoughts and feedback on the podcast. If you feel so inclined, please leave a 5-star rating and positive review for the Live Label Free podcast on Spotify and Apple or wherever else you're listening. And here's to lifelong learning, lovely listener. Peace out.
Baby, just one foot in front of the other, and you'll see